Yes, I can hear you
But
loud and
can
clear.
I see? Okay. Finally, I can see you. I've never been so happy to see a politician before.
And, and I've never been so happy to at least get on the phone where somebody can
Okay,
see.
finally, we got here. So welcome to episode 16, everybody of Teh Tarik Walid. Oh, and we still have about 150 people. So that's amazing. They were all waiting for you patiently. Thank you so much, Dr. Chee, for doing this. I know you
Thanks
must have.
for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, you must get plenty of requests. So I introduced you earlier as one of the most colorful and controversial figures in Singapore politics. And I think even though you have never been elected, I think you definitely will go down as a consequential politician, even more consequential than some elected opposition MPs. So thank you so much for being here. And I have a few questions, so shall we get to it?
Sure. Well, first of all, I just want to apologize for the delay. It's just this technical stuff that I'm not too, well versed with. So
it's okay. It happens. I mean, I'm still struggling with Instagram. So thank you so much. So the first question, and it has to do with my first impressions of you. And I was following politics some time ago as an ordinary Singaporean, and my first vivid memory of politics involves you because it was played over and over again on Channel 5, the news, the mainstream media, and that was about during the 2001 election, and where the scene where you were supposedly chasing then Prime Minister Goh, and so it's the "Come Here, Mr. Goh" incident, right? So my first question to you is, when I still remember that incident somehow. That's very vivid in my mind. And for a while, I know some people have said that they are upset at you because of what happened with Mr. Chiam. I think I don't find that to be an issue because that happens. Conflicts happen between people and between personalities, especially in politics. I also find it ironic that some of them who actually are not too fond of Mr. Chiam suddenly were on Mr. Chiam's side when he had a follow-up with you. I find that ironic. But so I had no problems with that. But when I was growing up, I did have sort of an issue with that particular incident because I thought it painted, it gave a non-constructive version of politics, right? Painted a picture of unconstructive version of politics. So my first question to you is, do you regret that incident, and do you think that incident has shaped public perceptions of yourself?
well, I think you hit it right on the nail on the head when you said that the television was just playing it over and over. This is just ad nauseum for that few days in there, and also the episode with Chiam, headlines were just blaring all over. If I had just watched, I don't blame you for getting that impression. And if I had watched it on TV, I wouldn't have liked myself, having read some of the headlines and seen it on TV. But therein lies the problem. Don't forget that those years, that era, that period then is very different from today, where I cannot just get online and talk with you like this and have people see me directly, unfiltered through the media. And you were at the mercy of the PAP and the media, and what they wanted to paint of you. You were just basically there for like a sitting duck. And it was during that period that I think people formed this impression of me and my brand of politics. But when they said I was chasing Mr. Goh, Chok Tong, around, we happened to be at the same spot in the same hawker center, and I was doing my thing, and he was doing his. And so, but how they wanted to spin the issue, as I said, you were helpless in terms of what was portrayed to the general public, and you didn't have an avenue of getting through to the public, unlike the social media of today.
Right. So I get that. I mean that's what the media does as well, right? The media sensationalizes things. But don't you think you sort of give them an opportunity to sensationalize?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess you know it's almost everything that you did that you could potentially open up um, an avenue for them to criticize you. But what do? As an opposition, there you had a job to do. You had to campaign, and it was during the height of the elections. During the situation with Mr. Chairman, even for example, during the period where, say, you know, during the period time when we were talking about the Tudong issue, I had gone to Speaker's Corner at that time to talk about this issue and why it was important at that time. There was this move to ban these schoolgirls from school because the parents wanted them to don the Tudong. So I went down to the Speaker's Corner and wanted to talk about it, and then immediately was approached by the police, and then subsequently charged for speaking on a religious topic at the Speaker's Corner. But you think about it, right? You needed that. As I said, there wasn't any social media at the time, and there was this place which you could at least speak directly to a Singaporean crowd. But then it was spun. It was used against against me in that instance, and then it was breaking the laws of Speaker's Corner and so on and so on. So you get this idea that almost everything you did, you would have to do it almost everything dictated by the PAP. Otherwise, you would be painted in a less than favorable light.
Right.
Became the bad boy of politics.
Right. So just the final point on this. So the counter to that, what people would say is, Cham Setang was never portrayed in that light. Lau Tia Tiang was never portrayed in that light, or even Pritam Singh is not portrayed in that light. So what was different about you that you were portrayed in that light, you think?
It's something which people have always told me, said that, well, it's the kind of policies that we put forth, because we were talking about the reform of the system, right? And if you were just to really talk about at that time in terms of policies, without the access to a media that would at least be independent and free to report what you said, that would have been very helpful. But because there wasn't, so we were talking about reform. As I said, you remember that there was a period before the advent of social media, and so you have to talk about making sure that at least our freedom of speech, that would include freedom of the press, freedom of the media, our freedom to assemble, our freedom to associate. These were the fundamental rights that Singaporeans did not have access to. And so we were talking about reform. I don't know whether it was because the PAP felt very threatened because of our advocacy in those areas here, there, and they moved in with everything they had to try to silence opposition politicians like me. And I must include J.B. Jeyaretnam at that time too, because we were moving very much in tandem on these issues.
Right. Okay.
On the fundamental rights of Singaporeans.
Right. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. So that's a good segue into the next question, which I intended to ask last. But basically, you said that you basically went further than the other opposition politicians except JBJ, right? So, do you think that the fact that you went further is why you didn't get elected, whereas the more moderate opposition politicians, I mean, moderation is relative, but the more moderate opposition politicians, such as Mr. Cham and Mr. Lau, did get elected?
I don't know. In my mind, I came into politics and joined the opposition not merely to get elected. For me, it was not a change in vote, but a change in mind, a change in heart, a change in our political culture. where everything is not defined by the PAP, where people could actually begin to assert their voice. That, to me, was the crux of the matter. So I don't know, but it was a very trying period where the PAP came at us with hammer and tongs and made sure that at every stage of the way, whether we were sued, made a bankrupt, and either prosecuted in court. So there was, you know, I take you back again to the time where we were talking about and championing free speech, and there was just no way that we could actually have a venue like you have at Speaker's Corner, where we could all gather together, stage, conduct speeches, hold a protest if we wanted to. There wasn't a venue at that time. So we went down and we talked about it, and I challenged the government at that time to at least allow Singaporeans to come together. And again, I was just portrayed as a radical, and then painted on in a very bad light. But at the end of the day, I think it was this effort to challenge them that eventually Speaker's Corner was established. And today, at least we have a venue where, Singaporeans can come down and voice their unhappiness on whatever issues, government of the day. That was all important.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt, which is why I started off by saying you are a consequential politician, even though you've never been elected precisely for the reasons that you've mentioned. But I wanted to push you a little on what you said. So surely every politician enters politics to be elected, right? Otherwise, you could just be an activist and do the same things, right? Why enter politics to do it? What is it that you can do in politics that you cannot do as an activist?
Sure, I mean, you could. I could have done that. But at that time, even an activist had their own difficulties. I take you back to the year 1987, which is just, not too long before I had entered opposition politics itself. And because the people who were accused of being Marxists somehow was just accused of that and then thrown into under detention without trial. So that has its drawbacks as well. But for all it's worth, you can actually get into politics and at the same time be engaged in some of the issues that are important. And I think, history abounds with such cases. Mandela was one of them, for example. And these are things that happen. Sometimes they cross over from one to another. Like Valenzo was another one of them, Aung San Suu Kyi, the rest of them. So you have cases whereby, and you just look no further than Malaysia as well, some of the activists have become politicians and vice versa. So,
right.
It's not a straight line or just a black and white situation.
Right, okay. By the way, for the record, I think there's nothing wrong with entering politics to effect change. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. So we've talked about the past, so let's move to the present. What went wrong or right for SDP during GE 2020? So in a sense, you can say that the SDP was quite successful yourself, 45%. I think many people thought you were down and out, but 45% is quite remarkable. And Professor Tambaya as well, 46%. I mean, it's quite an achievement. On the other, you still didn't get any seats after many years. So what went wrong or what went right for SDP, do you think, in the election?
Yeah, it really is a matter of whether you see the cup half full or half empty. If you've been with us through all these years, you would see that trajectory on up. And I take a lot of encouragement in that. Of course, we were terribly disappointed when none of us could get over the 50% threshold. But I think having said that, again, if you look at our history, we were gratified to see that at least we were making some headway inroads. And we just look forward to building on that. But I think the most important thing right now, again, is that we never compromised on our principles, and I put a lot of emphasis on that. Through the years, through the decades, we've stuck to what we believed in, and if we get into Parliament, it'll be on our own steam, with our own message, without having to compromise on what we believed in. And I think that if we do ever get into Parliament, I think that would be very, an achievement for us, which I think through the years we've been very proud of.
Right. Okay. So thank you. So Z asked, I'm taking questions here. So it's related to what you said. Why is it a conscious choice to take a less conciliatory approach with regards to the PAP? Do you see value in that, or why don't you see more value in the working within the system and tweaking the system approach that is taken by other parties? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the whole approach of being conciliatory must come for a reason and not for its own sake, if you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about, we've never taken a stance where we are personally holding grudges against PAP politicians. We're very much focused on policy, and whether it's just to defend the rights of Singaporeans, the right to freedom of speech, as I said, the assembly, association, or whether on issues, these are things that we find that the PAP is so far to, I don't know, on the political spectrum, we see it as to the right, that just in order to claw back and bring Singapore's politics to more to the center, would seem to be, very unconciliatory, very radical, very confrontational. But I just want to remind Singaporeans that this is all part and parcel of framing, and that's PAP defining the parameters and wanting to define and frame SDP, myself, as the radical, the bad boy. And as I said, if they control the media like they used to do, they still do, but it's only with the help of social media we've begun to get back some of these avenues that we're able to better communicate with our Singaporeans.
Do you think Singaporeans accept that framing of SDP as a radical party?
It's something which I think Singaporeans are slowly coming around. If the feedback that's been given to me, I think Singaporeans by and large are beginning to see, come to the realization that the SDP, what we proposed, universal healthcare, for example, abolish streaming, having minimum wage. No, policies that PAP are beginning to follow and beginning to implement to varying degrees. But if you follow that trend, you'll see that we are very middle of the road. And it's the PAP that begun to come back and know that where the pressure point is, because Singaporeans are no longer just wedded to the kind of media that they've been putting up, and they've got their voices carried through on social media. So they're becoming, I think Singaporeans are by and large coming around to seeing if the last election results in an indication. I'm very hopeful of what's going to come in the future.
Right. Okay. So, Dr. Chee, you became the head of SDP in 1993. Am I right? 1993? Or
I'm not sure. I joined it about around 1992, and then I took over the secretaryship only in 1995.
Oh, 1995. So that was when you were 33?
Just about, I think.
Just about 33. So those those who are older than 33, please re-evaluate what you're doing with your lives. Okay, so I guess since 1993, 1995, so don't you think that's a bit too long to be the face of the party? Do you think SDP would benefit from some rejuvenation?
Yeah, again, let's, we don't want to talk about rejuvenation for its own sake, right? It's not that we have, hordes of Singaporeans just knocking on the door and then wanting to join the SDP, right? You're still talking about the opposition. It's still a pretty scary position, proposition for Singaporeans wanting to join. Singaporeans there's still a fear factor. The climate of fear is still there.
You think it's
so
still
we're not
strong?
talking about.
You think the climate of fear is still very prevalent?
It's slowly, eroding, but there's still, I think, a significant level of fear among Singaporeans. It's not like we're a mature democracy in that sense, where people just speak as without any fear, without having a look over their shoulders. So you have the situation where we are still not a mature democracy, where opposition politics is still it's something which still is just very free in that sense. So I think having Singaporeans having that mentality, we're still trying to encourage and break down that fear, and so you're not seeing a long line of people wanting to come and join us. So in that sense, we still have ways to go in terms of attracting people. As far as we've come, compared to, say, when I joined the SDP, we were moving along very well already. The young Democrats are up and coming, but they'll need a few years, and we'll be beginning to go through that in the next years. In the foreseeable future, we'll see some of these people taking over leadership positions in the SDP, including the Secretary Generalship of the party.
Oh, any particular names? Or
well, there are some you see them on Facebook. I've gone, we've held projects with them. Stanley, Tan, Naresh,
right.
Mani, Marat. So the few of them, they're just we're trying to get there. Min is another one. And these are people whom we're going to continue to encourage to take leadership positions in the near future.
Okay, I'm looking for a scoop, so if you can give me any, I would really appreciate it. Okay, so the next question. You seem to have adopted, or you are beginning to adopt, a different strategy. You used to be national issues, big picture person. You were the person people were thinking, and no matter what people say about you, I think nobody can seriously say that you are not clear on your ideologies and you're not clear on what is the direction that. I think that is your biggest contribution to Singapore politics, giving a true alternative in the ideological sense to the PAP. But now you seem to be more of a, if I could say, PAP-esque candidate, talking about municipal issues, local issues. Is there a change, or am I reading too much into it?
I think you perhaps looking a little bit too much into it. Well, although no, with reason though. I think because after the last elections, I've gotten message after message in terms of Bukit Batok residents telling me, that can I do this? Can you just telling me some of the problems about some of the estate problems that they encounter, right? And some of them wanting more, requesting for more personal help, and others with social problems and so on. I can hardly turn away from those requests, but I find it very meaningful too, in terms of being able to engage them, and to whatever degree I can, to help them resolve whatever issues that there are. So in that sense, it's not been a conscious pivoting towards it, but rather responding to some of the needs and some of the requests from Bukit Batok residents. At the same time, I do want to refer you to some of the posts that I've been putting out on Facebook as well, where I've addressed some of the issues, like, for example, the cutting down of Kranji forest, and trace together situation where Dr. Balakrishnan actually assured us that the data there wouldn't be used except for COVID-19 issues and so on. And of late, this whole situation where Mr. Masagos didn't quite convey the kind of feeling, the deliberations that was going on behind the scenes, as expressed by Mr. Shanmugam. So all these things, these are some of the broader issues, if you will, in terms of how I would like to communicate. I will continue to do that. Very important issues, but at the same time, simultaneously, concurrently be able to talk about some of the issues that concern specifically Bukit Batok residents.
Right. Do you think Bukit Batok SMC will still be around in the next election?
I have absolutely no idea, but therein lies the problem, isn't it? This is gerrymandering, this introduction of this GRC system has gone on for too long, and it's just used as a plaything for the PAP, and it's just really horrendous. Right. That you can work in an SMC for years and then find that all of a sudden it just gets roped into a GRC. And don't forget, Bukit Batok was a single seat SMC almost 30 years ago. And after 25 years, after that, I think it was 1997, it was roped into the GRC Bukit Timah started off with, and then Jurong GRC and so on. And after a quarter of a century, I guess after, when Bukit Batok residents was, that they had, the opposition SDP out of their minds already, then they felt safe enough to put Bukit Batok as an SMC again. And then that's how the system works. And, it's something which we've got to contend with. But I'll still be fighting it in the constituency, come what may.
Right. So I actually, just as you were speaking, I had a question on the GRC, but I'll save that for later if we have time. So amongst the 5 questions I wanted to ask, the final one, there was more than talk. There were actually talks between different people about the opposition alliance. So what happened to that? And it seemed for a while that PSP and SDP actually would be leading that alliance. And don't you think the failure of that potential alliance, or the fact that it didn't materialize, don't you think that gives credence to the standard argument that, one of the opposition's problems is because everybody wants to be a leader, their egos are too big, therefore they cannot unite, and therefore they can never project a strong front against the PAP? How would you respond to that?
I think, during the last elections especially, I think we were broadly supportive of each other. But the very fact that we didn't come together as a formal coalition, I think that's only the sub-story, if you will, to the whole narrative about opposition unity. I think we did a very good job in at least presenting ourselves in a one-to-one situation in almost all the constituencies. And there was a lot of crosstalk. But if you're talking about a more formalized coalition, I think SDP we've been working towards that, at least in the decades that I've been leading the SDP in the years past. And it was no different this time. We invited all the opposition to come together. At least let's be able to sit down and talk. I'm not privy to what the discussion is within each individual political party, but rest assured, we have and will continue to try to work towards some kind of, at least an opposition where the public can have more confidence in terms of unity. But I think on the whole, credit to where credit is due. I think the opposition is in general has done a credible job in trying to come together and be supportive of each other, especially and it showed in the last elections.
Can an opposition alliance without the WP be effective, or can it work?
It's a question that I think perhaps someone like you, the political scientist, putting on your crystal ball and looking forward and analyzing a multitude of factors would be a better place to answer, right? But I think it's important that if, for the opposition coming as a whole together, can offer, I think, a very credible force to an alternative to the PAP. But again, we'll have to wait and see, and there are many factors. You know, if they say in 24 hours in politics is a long time, we've got another 4 or 5 years, and we'll just see what happens then.
Right. Okay. So, so I have. Maybe if there are other questions, I can take it as well. I see some people have typed out questions. So, there's some question on cannabis and all, but I think I want to stick to the broader question. So, the GRC, earlier you said that you are not in favor of the GRC, right? Just to confirm.
No, and I think we made the stand. Yeah.
Yeah. So how would you guarantee minority representation, or do you think there's no need for a guarantee?
You know, J.B. Jeyaretnam was elected on his own, steam. David Marshall, again, you know, you would put him in the minority category, was our first chief minister, and you see that trend in there, right? That whole idea of a GRC system was just so, the reasons for it, the excuses for it were so flimsy, you see right through it. So I still think that it's more a tool that the PAP has used to put heavyweight ministers, right, and then bring along some of these younger people on their coattails, right, into during the election. So these are things that we're very concerned about, the GRC system, that we would like to see abolished.
Right. Okay. So because I know SDP is one of, if not the only party that really had a comprehensive policy plan for the Malays, for instance, right? I remember reading it. It was very detailed. So maybe if I could push on the GRC point, right? Wouldn't you say that amongst the minorities there is a difference in perceptions towards the Indians and Malays? There is a problem of perceptions on some people, on the part of some people, where they think, oh, Malays are less than capable, or Malays are lazy. And it's nothing, for me, retaining the GRC is not about the Malays not being capable, because the Malays are as capable as the other races, or as not capable as the other races, right? So there's nothing in being Malay that makes you more or less capable. But if voting is about perception as well, then surely the perceptions people have towards the Malays puts the Malays at a disadvantage, and therefore you need the GRC at the very least to guarantee that. Not because the Malays are less capable, but because people have certain misconceptions about Malays.
Yeah, I guess you have to look back as early as, I think, a PAP who became a PAP MP who became the minister. It was Ahmad Brahim, wasn't it?
Ahmad Mata?
And that time,
yeah.
I think it was earlier on, and then it was Ahmad Mata, and so on. And
right.
Look, there was no GRC at that time. So you've got to remember, these are the things that I said. Sometimes it's how the PAP frames those issues. And then wanting to, with the control of the media, continue using this whole very flawed argument to convince Singaporeans that, hey, you need the GRC system, because otherwise then Chinese Singaporeans will not vote for Malay candidates or Indian or minority candidates. And therein lies the problem, when you don't have an open debate, or where there's avenues and for people to discuss. That's where you fall into all these problems of having a race define us. And I don't see how Singaporeans are not supportive of competent candidates that push themselves forward, who are rational and who argue well, speak well, are able to convince them, persuade them of their policies.
So you think racial voting is not a significant enough factor for us to...
Yeah. And we've got there's evidence before that. As I said, I pointed out,
Right.
many of
Yeah,
the
so
minority candidates from the opposition in PAP.
right. So Ahmad Ibrahim was a minister before independence, right? And Ahmad Mata was the one after independence. So, Dr. Chee, do you think the GRC is still as strong a tool of control, considering that two have fallen and one of them has fallen 3 times, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's a matter of, it's how the whole thing is wielded, because, the PAP is there to be able to say, hey, we want a bigger GRC, 6-person GRC, or as little, as few as 3. And then they can take in single constituencies, SMCs, and bring into the GRC fold, or have one of their component wards right now become a single seat. So there's just a lot of room for them to maneuver, which I don't think that should be the way, nor is it healthy for the development of democracy in this country.
Okay. All right. So let's see some of the questions. So someone was asking, if not the GRC, what do you propose? I assume you propose all SMCs, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So another question is, it's not really direct. Well, it's related. So someone was asking, do you think if we had an opposition coalition, it would suffer the same fate as Pakatan Harapan in Malaysia, because you are bringing different people and parties with ideologies, and the only thing that unites them is they are not PAP?
Yeah, I mean, every country has its own experience, in terms of political developments, and how they come together is crucial. So look, I wouldn't hold any country up as a model, but to depend on our own experience, and for us to forge an understanding, but it must be based on values. It must be based on like-mindedness in as far as policy are concerned, and most importantly, in our own interests, making sure that the country comes first. And this whole idea that sometimes coalition will just break apart when people pursue their own interests, that is very, very true. At the same time, I've seen coalitions that have held up very well. You look no further than some of the Scandinavian countries, in Germany, for example, multi-party system, but coalitions come together and they've create a very stable political system. So there are different lessons to be gleaned from these various systems, and I think that there are lessons to be learned, not necessarily from any one particular country.
Okay, thank you. That was a comprehensive answer. So there's a question from Iggy Pereira. What is your biggest regret as the Secretary General of the SDP?
Oh my gosh, it's things like that. I don't mean to get all philosophical on you guys.
No, carry on.
But I honestly think that when you regret something, you think that it's something which is going to haunt me for the rest of my life. But I've always seen the value in us as human beings making mistakes, because we learn from it. It makes us better people, it takes us to better places. And every time you go, there's a fork. You make that choice on what to do whenever you have a decision to make, right? And if you lean back and look at some of whatever you've learned in the past and let that guide you, I think you wouldn't use the word regrets as most people do. I think you take them as life lessons and be glad that it actually happened to you. Then you learn from it, and you go forward to improve oneself and make sure that your self-development takes place in the most effective manner as it can possibly get.
Right. I think whatever people say about you, whether they agree or they disagree, or whether they dislike you, no one can say that you have a lack of tenacity. So I just have one final question. It's already 40 minutes. The time flew by. So who is your favorite? Let's end on a conciliatory note, okay? So who is your favorite PAP MP? Haikal asked this as well. If you could co-opt one, who would it be and why?
I don't have one particular one, but I've said it before, and I'm on record as saying before.
Okay, other than
I
SF
remember.
Taman. Other than SF Taman. Other than SF.
You know, I've had my clashes with Mr. Tharman, right? And I see, you know, the positive of him, as well as some of the things which he said that are just very cringeworthy. And at the same time, with some of the other PAP, not just ministers, with MPs as well. And I've said this, I said on record, that I find many of them to be good, caring Singaporeans, people who have a heart for Singapore. But this is where I draw the line, because I don't indulge in personal politics or personal destruction. I take them for what they say and for the policies that they advocate, for the policies that they vote for, that they support. And this is where whenever I criticize, the SDP criticizes the PAP, it's always been, and will always be on policy. And it's got nothing to do with their personal well-being. And I don't wish them well at all. I give you one example. In the last GE, I remember Mr. Murali came in and gave a very impassioned appeal on the video to not attack his son. I found it touched me, because as a father, I knew how it felt when people go after your children. I said, no, you've got to put a stop to that. I could hear the pain in his voice. And I said, no, this is not what politics should be, and I just want to make sure that we put a stop to it, and let's get back onto just talking about policies, but on political grounds. And what he's advocating, what he's voted for in Parliament, and whether he's doing anything to help the residents of Bukit Batok because of his being elected as their representative. That's what I gun for. And if we agree, we disagree, it'll just be purely on those political grounds and on personal grudges.
Right, but surely after 30 years in politics, you have one PAP MP that you like at least.
Actually, I do. I do.
Not Tan Cheng Kok, right? Not.
Huh? You have to go way back. Way back.
Right.
And I think you know who I'm talking about, right? It was none other than Lim Chin Siong. You know, not just for his charisma. Jokes aside, right? For what he stood out, that man cared. He really cared for Singapore. And to see him have to go through what he did was just something which, even as I just a read of history, I met him towards the latter part of his life, and I could sense that sincerity, that passion, and that love that he had for country, and that really stood out for me.
I must say I didn't see that answer coming at all.
I'm sorry to disappoint you, but
It's okay. I mean, it is still a legitimate answer, I suppose. But I guess so if I were to put it in a different way, right? Who would you be most comfortable? Assuming the PAP will be in power for the next at least 2 to 3 elections, right? Who would you be most comfortable with leading Singapore after PMD?
From the PAP's point of view.
From the PAP, yeah.
You know, as long as they stand for what they stand for, you know, trying to anything from using race to define us and to drive that wedge, you know, for the sake of hanging on to power and making, you know, with policies that don't help the common person. I'll be very honest. I wouldn't feel, and then, you know, to have all the legal tools at the disposal to deny Singaporeans the freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. I don't know if I'll feel comfortable with any of them. You know, I just, as I said, it's got nothing to do with personality or personal politics. It's got everything to do with what they stand for and their outlook and their worldview for Singapore and the region, I suppose.
Okay. I try my best to get a name out of you.
I'm sorry to disappoint on
It's
this.
okay.
This is
No,
gotcha
no,
moment.
don't be sorry. Don't be sorry. But okay, Dr.
I'll
Chee, do
do
you
better
have
next time.
do you have anything else to say? Any wisdom you wanna impart to us? And the most of the audience they are gonna be from the younger generation. So do you have anything to say or anything to share? Final word.
I think I've said plenty. I wouldn't be so presumptuous as to be able to impart wisdom. I'm going through life just as all of you are, and I just want to wish everyone, be true to yourself. All right, be passionate in what you have the courage of your conviction. I think that's the best that all of us can do in this very imperfect world, where we're all trying to approximate the kind of persons or people that we hope to be. So there you go.
I think that's wise enough. So, Dr. Chee, it's been a pleasure, and sorry about the technical difficulties, but I'm glad we
No,
managed to do this nevertheless. Thank you so much.
the problem was all mine. I'm just sorry I couldn't get everybody waiting.
Thank you so much for doing this, and I hope to have actual Teh Tarik with you soon.
One of these days we will.
Yes, okay.
We will.
Take care. Bye-bye.